Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Continuing the book, Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi says, من حكمة الله في خلق الدنيا وجعلها زادا لما خلقه في الآخرة من الجنة والنار. And the wisdoms, or the wisdom behind creating this life, the life that we're currently in, as a means and provisions for what he created in the afterlife. Okay, so this whole question of why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create this world if he knows exactly what we're going to do and where we're going to end up? What's the point? And this is a pretty common question that we get. Why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just put us in paradise, put us in hellfire from the start? Right? What's the point? Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create this life the way he created it, where it's full of fatigue and full of challenges and full of tests and all of that? So we're going to try and dive into that today and see how far we get. So Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi says that as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything, he's also has certain actions. Right? So Allah has names, Allah has attributes, and Allah has actions. If you remember way back when, the first book that we took in Aqidah al-Tahawiyya, we went over the differences between what a name of Allah means, and what an attribute of Allah means, and what an action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means. But just to refresh our minds, a name of Allah is something that is always with him. He is this. Right? He is this. So when Allah says He is Rahman Rahim, He's the most merciful. When he says that, he is Al-Qawi, the all-powerful. He is Al-Aziz, the almighty. He is Al-Alim, he's the all-knowing. These are features of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are permanently with him. Right? And what that means is anything that happens is based on his names. Right? You cannot, so to speak, you cannot detach Allah's names from him. He is that. And therefore, any name that Allah has, then automatically He has that attribute and He acts that way. So if Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the benevolent, the all-merciful, then He has the attribute of mercy. And if He has the name of mercy, that means He has mercy. He has the action of mercy. So mercy must be in this universe. Right? An attribute, on the other hand, is something that Allah is, but not at the level of the name. Right? Not at the level of the name. Right? And He does the action. One of Allah's attributes is Al-Kalam, speech. Allah speaks. But when we talk about Allah's actions, we cannot derive a name from that action. So does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala vindicate on behalf of the believers? Meaning, does He, when someone harms the believers, someone harms His awliya, does Allah just sit there passively, or does Allah defend His awliya? Does He vindicate? He gets revenge or avenges His believers? He does, right? But we don't call, Allah doesn't have a name Al-Muntaqim. Allah Yantaqim, Allah gets, He avenges for the believers, but He's not the avenger. Does that make sense? Yeah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He plots and He plans. Right? وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهِ. They have their plots and plans, and Allah has His plots and plans. But we don't have a name of Allah that is, He is Al-Makir. And the reason is that these actions are more conditional. Right? Allah becomes angry for a reason. He's not Al-Ghadib. He's not the one who's always angry. That's not the God that we worship. But sometimes He gets angry because of certain things. It's a condition, right? So Allah has these actions. Allah becomes pleased with the believer after He was once displeased with them. Allah becomes displeased with someone who He was previously pleased with. These are His actions. Allah punishes certain people and Allah rewards certain people. These are actions, okay? So Allah has these things. He gives and He takes. He causes people to rise, He causes people to fall. He has mercy on people, but He also punishes people. So فاقتضت حكمته تعالى أن خلق دارا لطالب رضاه العاملين بطاعته المؤثرين لأمره القائمين بمحابه وهي الجنة. So on behalf of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made a home in the afterlife for those who pursue these actions of Allah, such as getting His pleasure, such as pursuing His reward, these actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jannah is their reward for pursuing that in this life. And the opposite holds true as well. Hellfire is for those who neglect or reject Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. They don't care for it. They reject it, they neglect it. In fact, they go against it. And for them is hellfire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this life to serve as a type of provision for the afterlife. ثم أخرج إليها من أثمار الدارين بعض ما اقتضته أعمال أربابهما وما يستدل به عليهما. So we have this life now, right? Remember, the point of this is how can we better understand the wisdoms behind why Allah created this life? And the goal is to reach a point where our understanding of this life highlights the fact that Allah is praiseworthy for creating this life. So there's paradise, there's hellfire. And there are reasons why a person makes it to paradise, and there's reasons why a person makes it or goes to hellfire, right? And it all goes back to what we do in this life. And this life is now meant to serve as a station, a mahatta, a station for reaching the afterlife. Here, we get our supplies, we get our provisions for the afterlife. So every time we do a good deed, and that goes into our book of deeds, as an investment for the afterlife. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take that deed and He will cause it to grow and grow and grow and grow until it becomes extremely massive, the size of Uhud. As one hadith says, a person will give sadaqah in the form of a date. You give a date to someone as a sadaqah. Allah will take that reward and continue to multiply it until the person returns on the day of judgment. That reward has become the size of Uhud. Right? So all of that is to prepare for the afterlife. Also, as one hadith mentions, that the currency of the afterlife are our hasanat. And the angels build our place in paradise using that currency. And the angels will continue to build so long as the currency is coming in. But as soon as the currency stops or runs out, then the angels say we have nothing to build with. Similarly, in our times, you'll find a building, for example, they're building, all of a sudden it stops for several weeks. You see, no. Why? Because, well, the builders, the construction company is not getting any money to continue the building. Similarly, the angels are working in that way, but our hasanat is a currency. Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spiritually prepares us for the afterlife. Right? He spiritually prepares us for the afterlife through this life. So one of the stations, if you remember, the stations of the believers is ash-shawq, longing for Allah, right? Longing for your meeting with Allah. And how when you love someone and you become distant from them because you're in one place, they're in another place, and after so many years you reunite, how is that reunion? It's very beautiful, it's very emotionally driven, it's very warm, it's very exciting. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made a span of time where the believers build this longing for Allah so that when they actually meet Allah, it's a meeting that is charged with love and emotions. Now, without this life, you miss that. Further, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made in this life, He's made in this life models or small images of what the afterlife holds. So there's a paradise, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't leave paradise as nothing more than an imagination in our minds, where you kind of just imagine it and you think about, I wonder how paradise is. No, Allah has made kind of a microcosm of paradise on this earth. So just like paradise has fruits that taste good and they smell good, and you have kind of a small model here. So that when you eat, or you smell that lemon off the lemon tree, how good it smells, and so it's so fresh and It's so beautiful, it's so big. It becomes an example for, well, if this is how it is in this life, how is it in the afterlife? Right? If having a home that has a view of the ocean and the mountains and the greenery and the fresh air and all of that, it's so beautiful in this life, well, how is it in the afterlife? So it gives a model. Allah gives us examples of what paradise is going to be like in this life. And the opposite holds true. Allah gives us examples of how hellfire is going to be by giving us examples in this life. Right? When you see, the wildfires, and you see that fire kind of slowly coming, and that fear that it creates for those who are now in the danger zone and now have to evacuate and run, and it's very hectic and chaotic, and now the police are coming and blocking certain roads, and you're confused, what do I do, where do I go? And this is part of how the Day of Judgment is. It's part of how the Day of Judgment is. We've all seen those videos about the earthquake, and when the earthquake first hit and what's going on. There was one video that someone pointed out where the earthquake is happening. People are running in the streets and they're coming down from the buildings and whatnot. And they pointed out that there was a man crawling on the middle of the street, crawling. Why was he crawling? Out of sheer fear, right? It's scary. Remember the earthquake that happened here? We were kind of the outskirts. It happened, I remember this very vividly. Yeah, the Northridge one, right? It was a 7.1? It was 7.1, right? We were 300 plus miles away, but we felt it. And I still remember we were here for Maghrib prayer. I go down to sujood, and how sometimes when you go to sujood, you get dizzy? Yeah. I thought I was dizzy. I get back up, we're doing at the end of salah, we're doing tashahhud. I'm still dizzy. There's something strange going on. It was like a wavy feeling, very strange. It's the first time I ever experienced an earthquake, by the way, right? So I get out of salah, I say assalamu alaikum. I look at the people behind me, I'm like, is this an earthquake? They're like, yeah. And then one guy, he gets up and he screams, it's an earthquake, and he runs out, right? Whereas the rest of the people, we slowly got up and we just made our way outside, right? That was it. So what you find is that when something like this happens, people react very differently. There is this one video of a scholar from Kuwait. An earthquake happens. And as the earthquake happens, he stops a lecture, he sits and he says, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, Rabbana la tu'akhidna, nasina wa akhta'na. Right? He starts making dua, he starts to ask Allah for forgiveness very calmly, very calmly. And there are other people who they just don't know what to do. There was this prank show in one of the Arab countries where they simulated an earthquake. So they brought someone to interview them. They think it's like a newspaper or some show. And they go in this room and they simulate an earthquake. And the reaction, the guest is standing up, where do we go? They can't get outside the door because they locked it. And they're screaming and whatnot. And it's funny, people are laughing. And then they brought a sheikh. Right? And the earthquake happens. And the sheikh just sits there and says, it's an earthquake, Allahu Akbar, Allah. Doesn't move. And the other guy, who's part of the show, is trying to create a ruckus. He's trying to get the sheikh to become all crazy and whatnot. He just sits there. People react differently. Based on what? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُثَبِّتُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِالْقَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ. Allah gives steadfastness to those who have tawheed in their hearts. Right? Now, again, not every sheikh is going to react this way. You'll have the coward sheikhs who, when that sudden scare factor comes in, they act like someone who has no tawheed in their heart. I've seen it before, right? And you'll have regular people who act their tawheed is clearly in the heart. The idea is Allah gives us models of what happens in the afterlife. An earthquake is a minor image of the earthquake of the afterlife. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمْ إِنَّ زَلْزَلَةَ السَّاعَةِ شَيْءٌ عَظِيمٌ. O mankind, be conscious of Allah. The earthquake of the afterlife, of the Day of Judgment, is grand. يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا تَذْهَلُ كُلُّ مُرْضِعَةٍ عَمَّا أَرْضَعَتْ وَتَضَعُ كُلُّ ذَاتِ حَمْلٍ حَمْلَهَا وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the example on that day. A woman who's pregnant will have a miscarriage out of fear. And people will be walking around like they're drunk, but they're not drunk. And you saw this in the images. Go back, go look at the videos, look at the images, how people are reacting. The guy crawling, right? Allahu A'lam, what's in his heart? We're not judging. We're just trying to take an example, an image, not to judge anybody. But he was in such a fear, he couldn't even walk, right? And so that is a model of the afterlife. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us glimpses of paradise in this life, and gives us glimpses of hellfire in this life, and gives us glimpses of the day of judgment in this life. Right? And what's that meant to do? It's meant to serve as zad, as provisions for the afterlife. Don't you want this beauty, this constant pleasure that you feel and you experience in this life? Don't you want that for eternity? That stress, that fear, that those difficulties that you've seen or you've observed other people going through, you don't want that? Okay, well, do the actions that prevents those things from happening, or prevents you from ending up in such a scenario. So when we see this, essentially what the goal is we take the afterlife more seriously. We take it more seriously. If I don't want to be in a situation where I experienced that earthquake and I'm seeing buildings falling down left and right, well, on the day of judgment, it's not buildings that are going to be falling down. It's the sun and the moon and the stars and the mountains. All of this start collapsing. I mean, the American brothers and sisters who went there and saw the images, they said, I spoke to one individual, he said, what you see on YouTube and news doesn't give you a fraction of what's really going on there. In Turkey.
Oh, okay. I thought you were
Right?
talking about...
It's a ghost land.
Yeah.
It's as though a nuclear bomb has gone off. That's how powerful the earthquake was. That's how much damage it had. Right? You don't want that to happen. Right? Does that strike fear in your heart?
Yes.
Oh, it does. That's scary. It shook all of our hearts. We know this. Okay, well, how about when you see the sun and the moon collapsing? How about when you see the oceans exploding and the mountains just dissipating, becoming dust? What's going to happen on that day? Well, for those who didn't prepare for that day, those who lived life feeling safe from Allah, not safe with Allah, safe from Allah, they will experience the fear that they were meant to live in terms of fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life. As the Prophet ﷺ says, a person will not live two safeties, nor will they live two fears. In other words, a person won't feel safe from Allah in this life and be safe from Allah in the afterlife. No. If a person lived a life where they don't care about Allah in this life, they will fear Allah in the afterlife. But a person who lived this life in fear of Allah, and we know what fear means. We went over this concept. It's not sitting there scared. It's not anxiety. It is, my actions have consequences. And my actions lead to something. And if I do something that displeases Allah, Allah will, do something that is discomforting to me, to keep me on the straight path. If that's the lifestyle I live, then in the afterlife, I'll feel safe. Despite all that going on around me, Allah will put this feeling of safety in my heart. Right? As Allah says, يُثَبِّتُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِالْقَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give steadfastness to the believers in this life and the afterlife. So while people are running around screaming, they feel drunk, going to every single individual saying, can you spare a hasanah, can you spare a good deed? The believers who lived with fear of Allah in this life, then they will be on mounts, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَوْمَ نَحْشُرُ الْمُتَّقِينَ إِلَى الرَّحْمَنِ وَفْدًا. On the day where we gather the people of taqwa, wafda, on mounts. You know how when the kings enter and the princes enter, they enter on mounts. That's what Allah does. Why? Because you lived with fear of Allah in this life. So Allah gives you safety in the afterlife. So the idea again is to put that inspiration in our hearts. When we see the good, right, of this life, and we see that as a model for the afterlife, and we see the concerns of this life, and we see when we use that as a model for the punishments of the afterlife, then we build this mindset of Allahumma la aisha illa aishul akhirah. Oh Allah, there is really no life except the life of the afterlife. There is no life except the life of the afterlife. Well, how so? The paradise that we see in this life, yes, it's meant to be a source of inspiration for us to pursue the paradise of the afterlife. But we know that paradise in this life is temporary, requires maintenance. Yeah. You could buy the house of your dreams, right? But it costs a lot to maintain. That's the reality. And we know ourselves. We can't wait to go on our next vacation. Right? Why are we so quick to want to leave our homes to go to a hotel like this small, right? And we feel, oh yeah, we went to a hotel. We got out of our comfort zone, and we relaxed ourselves. Of course, by all means do that. The idea is even our own homes that we spend so much time to try and get, we are there temporarily. It requires so much to maintain, and it still is not enough to, make us happy. We have to go to other places, and we go to other people's homes. We start getting ideas. Right? We watch these YouTube videos about interior designing and whatnot. Again, none of this is haram or unethical or strange or anything. But the idea is, even the paradise of this world that's meant to inspire us for the paradise of the afterlife, when we look deeper into it, we realize that it's not the real paradise. Allahumma la aish illa aish al-akhirah. There is no true living except the living of the afterlife. And those paradises in this life will not spare us from the stresses of life. Right? Will not spare us of the stresses of this life. And as one scholar said, there are 8 things, I mentioned this in my last khutbah, there are 8 things every single human being will experience in this life. One of that is confinement, stress in this life. No matter how much money you have, something will come to stress you out monetarily. It's truly amazing, isn't it? Why? That's the fabric of this universe. That's how it was built. You will experience stress. If not in your wealth, then in the fact that your wealth cannot help you in other stresses. That becomes stressful. A lot of people pursue wealth for independence, which is good. We want to be independent, right? That is prophetic. But if Allah wants to test a person, He will test the person in a way to show them that not even your money can help you. That's the point. The point of a test is to get us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it puts us in a mindset where we become more and more convinced that the afterlife is really the only true life. And that's meant to build that will, that ambition to pursue the afterlife. لأن النعيم يذكر بالنعيم. Because blessings remind us of blessings. Blessings remind us of blessings. All right, that's how it's supposed to be. For some people, blessings make them, discontent. Blessings don't improve their heart. They reject the blessings. They say, oh, I did this with my own 2 hands, and I worked so hard, and Allah didn't help me, and all this nonsense. But the idea is, when Allah gives you blessings in this life, it is meant to remind you of the blessings of the afterlife, so that you pursue it even more and more. And likewise, the stresses of this life are meant to remind you of the stresses of the afterlife, so that you avoid it. If a person, as the hadith says, a believer isn't stung from the same place twice. They don't make the same mistake twice. That's how a believer should be. And so if I go through one difficulty in life, I go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I seek His help, etc. But I also look and say, well, how can I avoid this another time? How can I not fall into the same problem? And this is why the West has advanced. Some people come and they say, well, why have the disbelievers beaten the Muslims? Right? And they say, okay, we're the believers, and Allah rewards the believers, and Allah gives victory to the believers. That's true, but there are 2 sides to that scale. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانِ. Allah sent the messengers and gave the messengers revelation. And Allah also sent down the mizan, right? The scales of justice. There are scales. Right? The Western world thrives off these scales. They do things correctly. And hence, if you want to build a building, how many permits do you need? How many inspections do you need? How many? And so when the earthquake hit, what happened?
All those farmers were good for nothing.
What is it?
All those farmers, they were good for nothing.
All the farmers were good for nothing?
Permits. When you
Permits.
Yeah,
No, the earthquake that happened here. Did we hear of buildings collapsing? Did thousands of people die? No. Why? Because Allah loves them? No. Because they worked according to the scale. They worked in accordance to justice. So Allah gave them justice. You worked hard, that hard work paid off. You see what I mean here? Right? But someone who's just a believer and doesn't do what they're supposed to do, what happens? You have Turkey, right? All these people who bypassed permits and bypassed inspections, and they cheated and they bribed, etc. They didn't work in accordance to the scale. Their iman didn't do much for them, right? And most of the Muslim world, unfortunately. There's a reason why there's a scale. The scale is there for a reason. Just because you're a believer doesn't give you an unsurpassable advantage. If you don't study for the test, you will fail. Yeah. Your dua isn't going to do anything for you. Right? So there's that scale of justice. فإذا رأى أحدهم ما يعجبه ويروقه ولا سبيل له إليه قال موعدك الجنة. So when we see things in this life, those homes that we can never afford, those cars that we can never afford, those vacations that are extremely expensive, there's these Amtrak vacations where they take you through scenic areas. There's one in the Rocky Mountains. Takes you through from Denver to Utah to Yellowstone and whatnot. It looks like an amazing vacation. It's like $5,500 per person. That's expensive, right? I hope to do that. I may never have the opportunity to do that. Or Hajj. Hajj. With the way Hajj is going, right? That's like you need to pull out from your retirement account in order to go do Hajj these days. It's ridiculous. And person starts thinking, well, how can I do this? The believer's mindset becomes موعدك الجنة. I will experience that. Maybe not here, in paradise at least. Right? So if we have the opportunity to go, the scenic images that we will see, and that going through these mountains and different terrains is meant to, or is the believer will use that to remember paradise. If this is how beautiful it is here, how about in paradise? If I don't have the opportunity to go, then I say موعدك الجنة. I will have the opportunity in paradise. So either way, it promotes this ambition. It builds this ambition where I'm going to work for my afterlife. وأخرج سبحانه إلى هذه الدار أيضا من آثار غضبه. So the same in terms of the opposite. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's anger. He shows us what His anger is in this life. When you see the stories of the nations that have been destroyed, right? Like the people of Lut alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes a punishment. Right? فَجَعَلْنَا عَالِيَهَا سَافِلَهَا وَأَمْطَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ حِجَارَةً مِّن سِجِّيلٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down like a meteor shower on this people, and it completely decimated an entire population. And the impact was so powerful and so severe on the ground that it literally, the dirt from under became on top. Now the traditional, or the kind of the widespread understanding of this is that Jibreel used his wing to lift it up and go upside. That's possible, right? But we don't have concrete evidence that that's exactly what happened. What we can say at least is that the impact of these meteors, if you want to call it that, coming on the floor was so powerful that the dirt just flipped upside down to where the dirt that's normally under became on top. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that in musawwama, right? The rocks had the names of the individuals that it would strike. Why? Yeah. It had the names of the individual it will strike. Why? What's the point of saying that? So that we know that is actually a punishment from Allah. It's not random. This isn't just some crazy natural phenomenon that just happened to happen. No. This was planned according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a punishment for these people. It's crazy. That is a small glimpse of Allah's anger. How about his anger on the day of judgment? Right? When he causes everything to cease to exist, and it's only him. After blowing the first horn, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes everything to cease to exist. And 40 will pass, either 40 days, 40 months, 40 years, 40, whatever it is. And Allah will say, Ana al-Malik, I am the king. Where are the kings of the earth? Ayna muluk al-ard, aw ayna al-jabbarin. Where are these people who walked about earth as tyrants, thinking that they're in control of everything? They're the first ones Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes after. And in hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, in the very long hadith where humanity goes to Adam ﷺ, say, oh Adam, intercede for us. And he says, I can't. They go to Nuh, they go to Ibrahim, they go to Musa, they go to Isa. They all say something. They say, Allah is upset today with an anger. He's never been this angry before. I'm concerned for myself. These are the prophets of Allah. Right? So when we see these major calamities that happen on earth, we believers, we believe that there's a punishment here. Some people want to come and say it's not. Don't say it's a punishment. It's just this. Ya akhi, it's a punishment. Why are we sugarcoating this? Right? I understand that, I hope by now you know me where if there is a difference of opinion that's valid, right? If there's a way of interpreting things in different ways, fine. I'm not going to be so passionate about it. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says in the Quran, these things come to strike fear in people as a punishment. I'm not saying every single individual who's a victim of this is being punished. We say for the believers it's expiation. But what caused it? Why it happened? Right? This is a small glimpse. It's a small glimpse of what could happen. نسأل الله العفو والعافية. والمقصود أنه سبحانه أشهدهم في هذه الدار ما أعد لأوليائه وأعدائه في دار القرار. So the point here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us glimpses, images of what the afterlife has to hold. ولما كانت هذه الدار ممزوجا خيرها بشرها وأذاها براحتها ونعيمها بعذابها اقتضت حكمة أحكم الحاكمين أن خلص خيرها من شرها وخصه بدار أخرى هي دار الخيرات المحضة ودار الشرور المحضة. But since this world is mixed between good and bad, and we're caught up between this, for believers who are good, they will find bad in their life, and by bad I just mean discomforts in their life. And there are bad people who will find comforts in this life. This life is not worthy of being paradise or hellfire. It is not the paradise of believers, it's not the hellfire, it's not the punishment of the wicked people. That's for the afterlife. In the afterlife, Allah splits the two. There is paradise, pure good, no bad. And there's hellfire, pure bad, no good. فكتب على هذه الدار حكم الامتزاج والاختلاط وخلط فيها بين الفريقين وابتلى بعضهم ببعض. So you have this mixture going on. You have good people between bad people and bad people between good people. And we are tests for one another. Religious people are a test for non-religious people. And non-religious people are a test for religious people. And it tends to be who's the majority, right? We all have examples of that one individual who's a practicing individual between a larger family. They go and they're always heckled. Why are you doing this? Why are you so extreme? Why this and that? And you have the opposite as well. You have the family who's religious, and you have the one individual who doesn't appear to be so religious, and they just go and harass that individual. Right? Instead of bringing the person closer, as one convert says on YouTube, he says, "Oh, that person became a Muslim. Let's scare him away from Islam." He's kind of criticizing Muslim communities, and I hear this across the board. You have a person who becomes a Muslim, and this is a brother or a sister who's there for Fajr and Isha frequently. And they're there for Jum'ah all the time. These are signs of Iman. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ says, hypocrites are the ones who don't attend Fajr and Isha prayer. You have this brother coming for Fajr and Isha prayer. The Prophet ﷺ says, whoever frequents the masjid, then testify for their Iman. And you have this brother frequenting the masjid, and people look at the person with suspicion. Who are you? Why are you here? And everyone feels like they have the authority to teach this person exactly, you're doing that wrong, you're doing that. And they don't feel comfortable. It's not right. right? So we're a test for one another, and we, more practicing people, we need to be very cognizant of how we behave and interact, and even look at other people. They feel it, man. They feel it. Yes, there are both sides to this. You have people, let's go ahead and say this bluntly. You have people from the Arab community who will come to the masjid in very inappropriate clothing. Right? Condolences. We've all seen this, right? And it's always Arabs. Arabs do this. And I point that out. Why? Because, I don't mean anything by this, but Arabs have more access to scholarship than other regions of the Muslim world. I'm not saying they're the only scholars you'll find are Arabs. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that they have more access to this information. The da'wah has been going on for many decades. They're not ignorant of this. Right? They're not ignorant that it's inappropriate to enter a masjid in such clothing. So you can't say, maybe the person doesn't know. Maybe someone coming from an area of the Muslim world that has less access to scholarship, they don't speak Arabic, they really don't know, and they enter the masjid because, they're just doing something normal. They don't know, it's ignorance, fine. You can't say that about Arabs. I don't care what country they come from. All Arabs know this. Yet they have the audacity to do it. Why? You cannot understand it except that it's intentional. This is how I am. You have to accept me. Yet, when a non-Muslim wants to visit the masjid, every single time they will email me what is appropriate attire. Right? So, you have this going on. We're a test for one another. We have to be very cognizant of how we present ourselves. We have to be respectful for how we present ourselves. One time there was a wedding for a family member, and we went to the bride's home. And in their home, they're playing music and whatnot, and the more religious people became uncomfortable, right? They're playing music with this. And I told them, this isn't your home. You don't have the right to dictate what they do in their own home. Even if what they are doing is not appropriate. You can advise them afterwards. Find the right time. This isn't the right time to give Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, man. The mindset is on something else, right? It's not your home. So the religious person has to be respectful when they enter the home of another person, even if they're doing something that's we see as inappropriate. Advise them, yes, but at a proper time, right? And the same holds true in the opposite. When a non-religious person enters a religious person's home, they need to be respectful for that person's home. So we are a test of one another. I keep going on tangents today, but whatever. So there are wisdoms in all of this. And فَقَامَ بِهَذَا الْإِخْتِلَاطِ سُوقُ الْعُبُودِيَّةِ كَمَا يُحِبُّهُ وَيَرْضَى. And as a result of this mixture of good and bad, now you have a fertile ground to really build iman. This is what makes this life fertile for the building of iman. The afterlife, however, is not fertile for building a relationship with Allah. It's not meant to be that. The afterlife is meant to be the place where you are rewarded for what you did. And that cannot happen unless the good and bad are mixed. Paradise is pure good, there is no bad. Hellfire is pure bad, there is no good. So there is no opportunity in paradise or hellfire to build your ubudiyyah, to build your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This life is perfectly fertile for it. So when you have this mixture, when you have to deal with people who are different than you, who see things differently than you, who have a different upbringing than you, now you have to make a choice. How do I act? You can act with patience, or you can be impatient. You can act with politeness, or you can be impolite. You can act with wisdom, or you can be unwise, or you can be passive. And for the believer who truly wants to build a relationship with Allah, and they're in a situation, what's the first thing that comes to mind? In terms of how do I deal with this? They think, how would the Prophet deal with this? Alayhi salam. Okay, well, I don't know how the Prophet would deal with it. Okay, let's go ahead and research how the Prophet would deal with it. You see how the relationship with Allah is being built? Without that, you can't. If I'm in a place where all you have are perfect people who love Allah and everything is good, this is never a question that will come up. Right? So the wisdom behind this life is that it's made in a way that promotes the afterlife, that connects you with the afterlife, so that you have the ambition and the motivation to do what gets you there. Plus, you have this mixture of good and bad in this life and the tests of this life as a result of that, that will force you to make a decision. Do you be patient or impatient? Do you pursue your desires or are you going to pursue Allah? And that's where the relationship comes in. Because what is a greater reward in the afterlife than being with Allah? That is the greatest reward of the afterlife. But in order to really be with Allah, then you have to have that relationship prior. Adam alayhi salam, when he was in paradise, he didn't have that level of relationship. It was this life that helped him build that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What time is it? فاستبان للعقول والفطر أن القاهر الغالب لذلك كله واحد وأن من تمام ملكه إيجاد العالم على هذا الوجه. And then finally, we went over this before, in this life Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala acquaints us with names and attributes of His that we cannot get to know unless you have this fertile ground of good and bad. Right? What's the point of reaching out to Allah for His help if you live in a place that's perfect? You don't need His help. I mean, if fruits and vegetables come down to me as I walk, why would I ever ask Allah for help? If everything is lush and flourishing, why would I ever say, oh Allah, please make it rain? Alhamdulillah for all the rain that we've been getting. Alhamdulillah. If all I have to do is think about something and it comes to me, how would I get to know Allah's name, Ar-Razzaq? So we need this mixture of good and bad. We need this mixture of ease and difficulty, this mixture of rest and work in order to be fully acquainted with Allah's names and His attributes, hence building that relationship. So you have kind of these three primary wisdoms that's going on here. Why Allah created this world? Well, one, it's a place where we can build our afterlife. The afterlife is not a place where you build the afterlife. As soon as a person dies, the book of deeds are closed. Done. That's it. What you got, you got. There is no increase except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? What you got is what you got. That's it. So this life is a time where you're able to invest and build in the afterlife. Number two is that, what was it? Well, we have the names and attributes of Allah. We get to build our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number three, it builds our character. Right? From the good and bad of this life, the way it's made, it forces us to be patient or impatient. It forces us to make decisions that brings out the true essence of Iman. A believer is not someone who just prays 5 times a day. Right? That's a beginning level. And I love this moment in the life of a companion. I don't know what companion it was. He was out. Right? He was out going somewhere. Forgot the details of the story. He was either trying to meet up with the Prophet ﷺ, or it was after the death of the Prophet. He's traveling or whatever. He goes out and he's traveling. He wants to pray. And a lion comes. What came? A lion. You know how big a lion is? Right? You know those pranks that they do where someone dresses up like a lion and they're hiding behind a corner? What happens to the person? Right? Of course, that's how we would react. We would run for our lives. What else can we do? This companion got out. He sees this lion. And you know what he tells the lion? He says, if Allah commanded you to eat me, get it over with. But if you're not commanded to eat me, leave me alone so I can pray. And the lion just left. Right? The lion just left. See, when these young people who are still new in Iman, they hear this, they think it's just something you can replicate. Oh, if I see a lion, I'm going to tell him the same thing. That's not what's going on with this companion. What's going on with this companion is that from his life experiences, his his learning from the Prophet ﷺ, his going through the battle of Badr and immigration and Uhud and the economic woes of what happened and the ups and downs. This person has built a relationship so strong with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he realizes Allah's place in the world. Right? Allah's place in the world. Take something like tawakkul. Think of someone who you know you can 100% depend on. Right? Think of someone who you can most depend on. They will never fail you. Was it always that way? Your relationship with that person, was your trust in that person always that way? Of course not. The first time you interact with this person, you're wondering, is he going to follow through or not, or what's going to happen? Right? But time and time again, they always come through with it. You know, I don't even need to tell this person. They're going to do it. Let them do it the way they want to do it. Same thing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you have experience with Allah, the more you're able to see Allah's role in the things that happen in your life. You build this trust where it becomes so strong. Your trust in Allah is so strong that, I need this. Allah will bring it. I don't even need to think about it. Allah will bring it one way or another. I'm not even going to think about it. That's it. That's strength, right? So his companion had that level of iman with Allah to the fact that he knew if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. There's nothing I can do about it. And if it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. So he looked at that lion, and he told the lion, if you're going to eat me, end of story. If you're not going to eat me, I have salah to do, leave me alone. The lion just left. Right? So it's coming from the heart, from that experience, that can only come about as a result of this life. Right? That's where the value is. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. We'll go ahead and stop there. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله